60% of Americans have one chronic condition, and 40% of Americans actually have two or more chronic conditions. And yet pharmaceuticals are being prescribed at record levels. I was in litigation for many years, and then I went into a small family pharmaceutical business where I was able to, I thought it was great. I'm like, we're delivering life-saving medications, and this is wonderful. I'm helping people stay healthy. But after being in that industry for a while, you start to see a lot of the abuses. You see the over-prescribing of medications. I was really adamant about getting out of that industry and doing something that was more focused on the root cause of an issue. We have been kind of brainwashed that bacteria is bad when really bacteria is actually incredibly beneficial to us. So probiotics is a really great tool to help support your gut health. We want more of the friendly bacteria.
You are watching a special edition of the Sean Spicer Show. Is Big Pharma making you sick? Brought to you by Just Thrive. All right, good to see you. Welcome back to the Sean Spicer Show. There has been something that's been there's an issue that I've been talking about for a while. If you remember, we did a show a little while ago about Big Pharma, Big Food. Got a breakdown from Alex Clark about this. And I keep going down back to this because I have this belief that the government, the FDA, the Department of Health and Human Services, all these health agencies and administration are supposed to be protecting us, keeping away bad food from us so that we live better, we live healthier. I don't think that's happening. And I think that to some degree, they're in cahoots with Big Pharma. I mean, you hear these stories and I watch these documentaries where you're seeing people go from government into pharma to approve drugs and to one thing said. And I really wanted to take a deeper dive into what's ailing us right now. Today we've got an unbelievably special guest that can help do that. Tina Anderson was a Big Pharma attorney. She realized through her career that a lot of times it was just about prescribing more drugs. It wasn't about making people healthier. And she began an entirely new journey with natural medicine, founding a company called Just Thrive. And I want her to break down what's going on in the industry, how we're getting or not getting our information, what's healthy, what's not healthy, and what we should be doing to get healthier. Because I think, unfortunately, Big Pharma and the government aren't necessarily looking out for us. So with that, I'm excited to bring in Tina Anderson. She is, as I mentioned, a former pharma attorney and now the CEO and founder of Just Thrive Health. You can check out their products at justthrivehealth.com. With that, Tina, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here with us.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Sean. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Well, good. I'm excited because I kind of have become obsessed with this intersection between health and government. And I'll tell you what I mean, because my wife thinks I'm a bit insane. I've now become like, I buy the books about longevity and health. I consumed Dr. Peter Attia's book, Outlive. And then I've been listening to like Huberman podcasts, like anything I can get my hands on about health and wellness. And what's really driving a lot of this has become like an obsession of mine. But what really kills my wife is that all of the changes that I want to make are largely driven off of Instagram videos that some kind of healthcare provider is given. And it's like, you're the expert. So now I get to bounce some of this off you. But let me just start with this because you have such a fascinating background. And this is kind of what I was saying before about where my obsession and my kind of intersects with my knowledge of government, because I just figure the government's always going to look out for us. That's how I kind of grew up, that if they said that this was healthy or good or whatever. But you were in Big Pharma, and just describe for the audience what your role was with respect to advancing the pharma agenda, if you will.
Sure. I'm an attorney, so I was in litigation for many years. And then I went into a small family pharmaceutical business where I was able to, I thought it was great. I'm like, we're delivering life-saving medications and this is wonderful. I'm helping people stay healthy. But after being in that industry for a while, you start to see a lot of the abuses. You see the over-prescribing of medications. You see pharmaceutical reps coming in and saying, you know what my job now is? My job now is to go to every doctor in this hospital system and lower the number that they would prescribe cholesterol medicines for. So we would see this time and time again. And then, of course, we saw it with our own relatives where they'd be on one pharmaceutical and that pharmaceutical started causing stomach issues. And then they took another pharmaceutical to help the stomach issues. And then that started causing joint issues. And then before you know it, they're on a dozen different medications and never getting any better. And it didn't take too long to realize that really the emphasis is not on health. It's really, it's a sick care system. We know that. And no one's focusing on health. And so I was really adamant about getting out of that industry and doing something that was more focused on the root cause of an issue.
It's interesting because the story that I know you and your husband tell is that you're pushing this cholesterol medicine and then you get this anecdote. You know how we take this to the next level? We go to every single doctor in the hospital and convince them to lower the minimal cholesterol benchmarks. And I had just seen a documentary based on, I'm obsessed with all of this right now. And they talked about how it was a reclassification of a drug. If we just get doctors to admit that you can use this certain drug for this instead of this, we can prescribe more. Mm-hmm. And it dawned on me that these guys were literally like, okay, we've made this investment in this drug. How can we just get the number of prescriptions higher?
Yeah. Yeah. And you see this cholesterol meds is an example that have only skyrocketed, and heart disease has only skyrocketed since the onset of cholesterol medicine. So and we see this all time and time again with so many medications. And, I do feel like there is a time and place for pharmaceuticals. I feel like for acute type situations,
sure,
emergency situations, if God forbid I was in a car accident or something, I would want to get some pharmaceuticals. But when we're talking about chronic conditions, I just don't feel it's a place to start. I don't think it's where we're going to focus on.
And the thing that's so interesting to me, I get it. Every time I go to see the doctor, it's like before they even ask how I'm doing, they pull out the pad. And they're like, And at the end of the appointment, they're like, okay, I wrote you a prescription for this. And then there's a thing for this. And we're going to do this. And the thing that, like I said, where I feel like my obsession has come into play is this recognition that we're never trying to solve, as Kamala Harris would like to say with immigration, it's all about the root cause. Like, I'm like, okay, how much of this is, hey, maybe you're overweight and that's causing diabetes or whatever. But it's like, let's give you something to deal with the current condition, as opposed to how do we get to the root cause of what's causing you to be sick so that you don't have to take a pharmaceutical, a pill anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That is my passion, is getting to the root cause. That's never an issue. That's never anything the doctors are talking about, or the root cause of an issue. And that's where our passion lies, is just, let's find out why do you have diabetes? Why do you have heart disease? Why do you have anxiety and depression? Why do you have allergies? We need to get to the root cause. And that's where, unfortunately, the medical system and pharma is failing us. 60% of Americans have one chronic condition, and 40% of Americans actually have two or more chronic conditions. And yet pharmaceuticals are being prescribed at record levels. So, there's really no emphasis on getting rid of chronic conditions or focusing on chronic conditions.
I don't know if you can answer this, but like when I was growing up, when I say growing up, like in my 20s and 30s, I had a lot of friends that were farmer reps. You kind of described some of it, and they would go around doctor to doctor to doctor trying to get them to prescribe more. Sometimes they would have gifts or invite them to something or whatever. And they seemed to do well. A lot of them got cars and whatever. And I always thought it was kind of cool. Just from a job standpoint, I was like, that's kind of a nice lifestyle. They all did very well. On the flip side, do you think that doctors, you talked about prescribing it more when it came to this cholesterol medicine. Do you think that they understand what they're prescribing, or are they just buying into it?
Gosh, it's so hard to think on behalf of all the doctors out there. I do know that obviously medical schools are funded by big pharma. That's a big problem, I think, in the industry. Doctors, I think, go into medicine with wonderful intentions. And I don't think many are ill-willed, but they're just part of a system. The insurance, they could only prescribe certain blood tests. There are, like, C-reactive protein, for example, is a really great blood test that people should be taking to find out the heart inflammation. And yet, that's not even a part of a normal panel for a regular checkup. Homocysteine, another inflammatory marker. And we don't see doctors, checking that. So it's just what they're being kind of taught. And it's like this, almost like a, I don't know how to describe it. It's like an institution that's not really functioning well and not focusing on healthcare.
Well, it's funny because I hear these stories. As I said, I've been listening to the documentaries, reading the books, the podcasts, whatever. How many times it comes up that in the course of medical school, doctors never focus on nutrition, right? They're not told about how to make somebody healthy. It's always how to deal with someone once they get sick.
Yeah, exactly. That is the biggest thing that no one's ever talking about that. And it drives me crazy. I have a family member who is diabetic and, we're like, maybe you shouldn't be eating so much sugar, but it's like, no, the doctor just says to take more insulin, and you're like, oh my gosh, no, you need to cut sugar out. And I mean, most people who are diabetic know this, but again, the doctors are just saying, well, just take the medicine. It should be okay. And again, not doctors are ill, they're not ill-willed. They want to help people, but unfortunately they're just part of the system and almost have been brainwashed a lot by pharma. They are being educated by big pharma, just the sales reps like you talked about, but then also in medical school even.
It's funny. So I walked into my doctor's office, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago. And when you walked in previously, they had like a display of different products that they had sold. It wasn't a ton, but one of the things that they apparently must have had some kind of deal on was these meal replacement products, right? So you could get a shake of some kind. There was like a chocolate shake and a vanilla, whatever. And they were basically having a clearance sale at the doctor's office. Mm-hmm. And there was a little sign in front of it. It said, due to the explosion of GLP drugs, i.e. the Ozempic, the Wegovy, there's, we basically aren't selling these anymore because now we can just give you a shot. And again, I'm not saying that those probably were the best things ever either. I don't know. But what I thought was funny is that they basically said, we're going to stop trying to get you to lose weight somehow that way. We're just going to now give you a drug. And it was, to me, the most visual way of recognizing what's happening now, which was we've just now shifted everything. So it was a clearance sale. They were basically offering these things at bargain basement prices for what the doctor had been selling them, because it was like, hey, we can now just get you on this drug instead.
Yeah. And I mean, that we don't talk about the side effects that are coming along with this drug. So obviously people are having some success with it. It might help those who really, need to lose a lot of weight and the diabetes is worse than some of the side effects. But unfortunately, so many people are taking this and, are seeing horrible side effects. I mean, depression and, not having an appetite is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing in a lot of cases. So no one's thinking about the long-term consequences.
So if we get back to this issue that I have about like the government's aspect of this, right? I grew up with the food pyramid. Here's what you eat. Here's how many servings. And we've started to realize that that's just a joke. It's not based on anything real. It doesn't amount to anything. And I start to think to myself, is the government in cahoots with these folks? Is the government actually the smartest people in this? Because I don't know. I sort of was one of those people growing up that was like, if the government says that this is right, well, they've got to have our best interest at heart. If the doctor tells me to take this pill, the doctor's got to be right. Who am I to question these experts? Mm-hmm. And now I feel like every time I turn around, I've got to scratch my head and say, is that really the deal? Or is there some kind of, are they in cahoots together, or do they just sell out? Am I wrong? Because I feel like the food pyramid is the perfect example of people buying into something and then the government kind of later on being like, oops, not really.
Yeah, no, I share your exact sentiment, Sean. I grew up the same exact way, thinking that, well, the government said it's okay. The government would never do this. But now when I see, like, for example, pesticides that are sprayed all over our food supply, I mean, it's literally damaging our health. And yet it's sprayed everywhere and it's banned in all, Europe and other countries. But yet we have these pesticides that are sprayed all over and it's like, oh, it's okay.
Wait, the perfect example, I don't mean to interrupt, but you're triggering so many thoughts I have. For example, I was told you're eating too much meat. You should switch over to fish. Now, first of all, that in itself probably isn't true. But secondly, so I was like, they were like, what kind of fish do you like? And I was like, well, I like to grill, a lot. So I can grill tuna, I can grill salmon. I'm like, oh, salmon, great. Well, then I start to find out that like, if you don't get wild salmon, if you get the farm raised, they're injecting color into it. They're injecting all this other stuff and it's probably doing you more harm than good. And this gets back to your point about pesticides. if it's that bad, why am I putting it into my body? And who is, I mean, shouldn't somebody be saying, hey, dude, that's bad for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have to pay more to get organic. It's mind boggling, that we have to do this. And people are like, oh, you're kind of a weirdo that you eat like organic. And it's like, well, no, I mean, organic doesn't mean, it means like, it's just clean. It doesn't have all the pesticides that are very harmful to our overall health.
Do the people in Europe, you mentioned you go over there, you get fresh bread, right? They don't jack it with all these pesticides as you're putting in. They ban a lot of the dyes that we allow in our foods. I see these things, again, going back to my Instagram example, but it's true. Like they'll show a bag of Doritos in the United States and say, okay, all this is banned in Europe, or here's a Gatorade bottle or whatever. And they have several products on these side-by-side comparisons. And I can't, again, my wife's like, you've got to, I cannot believe you're getting all your health information from Instagram. But at the end of the day, I'm like, but where's the government to say if like a red dye is not acceptable in all of Europe, why is it acceptable here in the United States? Who's making that call?
I'm grateful for Instagram. I mean, to be honest with you, there are people like
me too.
The Peter Attias and the Andrew Hubermans out there that are giving real great information. And I think we have to be vigilant. We have to be our own CEOs. We have to be able to empower ourselves when we go into the doctor and ask for certain blood work that we want and know what foods to eat and what foods not to eat. But, and again, there are abusers on Instagram. There's abusers on TikTok. There's abusers in our government. I mean, there's abusers everywhere, but you have to empower yourself and see what makes sense. I mean, I'm always about, let's just use common sense here sometimes. It makes sense. We shouldn't.
It's not just makes sense though, but going back to the point that I was making, Tina, I felt like for the longest time, and I'm over 50 now, but up, well through my 40s, I thought if the FDA says it's okay, it's got to be okay. Like they're the Food and Drug Administration. They're the ones who protect us. I did trade work for the U.S. government, and we talked about GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and I was told, hey, Europe's just trying to prevent our exports from going into their markets. And now I'm hearing about all these drugs that we're putting into it. And I'm going, maybe they were right.
Yeah, no, I mean, we need to stay away from all the GMO stuff. We have to stay away from all of the pesticides as much as possible. Unfortunately, we can't even get away with it. It's in our rainwater now. I mean, it's hard to get away from it at all. But I would always recommend just like dramatically reducing your exposure to pesticides and GMO.
But it's beyond pesticides, right? Like my doctor keeps going, you got to drink more water. You got to drink more water. So I've been trying to drink more water. Then what do I find out? Well, the bottles probably are leaking plastics into, and I'm going, oh my God, like at some point, how does that happen? Why do we, again, it goes back to my concern, which is we trust that if it's getting on a shelf, that somehow it's gone through this approval process. Mm-hmm. And I keep seeing these videos where I'm being told, X parts per million of plastic are going into your body because you're drinking out of a plastic bottle.
Yeah, no, we cannot rely on the government to protect us right now. No way. I mean, we just can't. I mean, we have to be our own advocate in these situations. And that's why I left Pharma. I mean, that's exactly why I left it. I'm like, I need to do my life's work and I need to do something that's actually impacting people's health and not doing something that is just, furthering the issues that people are having in the health industry.
Are you as concerned as I am about forever chemicals and the idea that they're in everything from sunscreen to cosmetics to shirts and different articles of clothing?
Oh, absolutely. And there's the way we vilified the sun. Now that you bring up sunscreen, I mean, we vilified the sun, and yet the sun is wonderful for us. And it's literally our source of vitamin D, and yet we vilified it. And now people are slathering these chemicals all over their babies and their kids with this like new fresh skin. And it's just, oh my God, it drives me crazy. I don't suggest somebody go out and get sunburn and like be out in the sun uncovered for hours and hours, but getting some sun exposure is really beneficial in my opinion, and a lot of experts out there.
It's funny because, I mean, first of all, as a fair-skinned Irishman, I when I go to the dermatologist, I always call it like their college fund for their kid, because I walk in, they're like, zzz, 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 zzz. And so they're constantly, you got to wear sunscreen, you got to wear a hat, you got to stay out of the house. And then, no kidding, I go to the doctor and get my last labs back, and the nurse practitioner walks in and goes, you should start taking some vitamin D. And I said, really, why would I take vitamin D? Like, what's the issue? She goes, you're not getting enough sun. I go, my God, will you guys figure out? First, the dermatologist is like, you got to stay out of the sun. You got too much. And then the doctor's telling me now I have a deficiency in vitamin D. And I'm like, make up your minds, folks.
I know, I know. That's the problem is they give this one piece of advice and it's just this one little silo they're looking at, but they're not looking at the whole body. That's why I'm a huge fan of functional medicine or integrative medicine, where they're just looking at the whole body and seeing how other one organ affects another organ and how the whole body works together. I don't think we could look at things in a silo.
So again, I don't mean to keep making this about me, but it's like when you say things, I went in, I've always, look, just to be fairly straight up, I've always, since my adult life, I've struggled with weight, right? I've gone up and down like a yo-yo. And I was complaining to my doctor at my last appointment that, hey, I've made a lot of changes in terms of diet and exercise. And so, yeah, I've lost a bunch of weight, but it's not been as much. And she pulled up my labs and she looked at me and said, but here's your liver function, here's your A1C, here's your thing. And she started going through the full panel and explaining, to your point, which you just, how it's all connected. And if you do certain things, it actually has a holistic betterment to your well-being. And it's rare that that's explained to me. And she said, you've got to just stop focusing on one number. I know that you're obsessed with that, but she's like, what's happening is you're increasing your longevity and your overall wellness by doing certain things. And there's not many people that take the time right now in medicine to connect those dots.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the key, is just understanding that one supplement you take or one one lab that you look at is going to affect something else. And we just have to be looking at the whole body. I couldn't agree more.
So I'm seeing a lot of trends these days. I mean, first of all, let me ask you this, because is this a US problem? You know, I mentioned how in Europe, they don't allow the GMOs. They ban a lot of the stuff. When it comes to their overall health and a lot of the issues that we face here, are they seeing the same things, or because of what their government does to protect them, are they in a better place?
Yeah, I do think Europe is in a better position than we are when it comes to that. Not just like the fact that these chemicals are being, banned in their country, but even like the choices that they have. We are going, you go to the grocery store and we have choices and choices and choices, which seems like a luxury, but it really isn't, because everyone's putting different ingredients in to, sell the product, and it's so marketing focused and marketing driven. It's not, our food supply is not about health and wellness. And so many more people live off the land in Europe, and their land is clean and they're getting they go to the grocery store more often, getting fresh vegetables on a regular basis. So I do think it's, worse in the United States, unfortunately.
So we keep seeing these reports about cancer rates rising among younger and younger groups. How much do you think that's tied to a lot of this, to what we're putting in our bodies, to like forever chemicals, to pesticides, to things like that?
Yeah, I think it's very related to the forever chemicals, to the pesticides. I think stress is also a huge contributor to it. I think that people minimize stress like it's just part of life. Well, it really wasn't part of life. We always had this fight or flight. We evolved with this fight or flight mechanism. And it was fine back in the day. It was a protective mechanism. When we were in that fight or flight state, that was to run away from a saber-toothed tiger. That was to get ourselves, protected from these animals coming after us. Now we are in a fight or flight state all the time. I mean, we are literally, we see a tweet and it gets us mad. We get an email and it gets us mad. And we as a society, we're not coming down from that fight or flight state. And so
what's the answer to that? I mean, listen, you're preaching to the choir on that stuff.
Yeah.
What takes it down? Like, what do I do if I identify with what you just said? What's the answer?
Well, I think there's a lot of different answers. I do think sometimes people have to make dramatic life changes, because stress is going to kill you. I think it's going to kill all of us if we don't really try to minimize it and, not be the hero to try to, do so many tasks in one day. But I think also just like meditating and being outside in nature and things like that, which I know nobody has time for. Probably many of your listeners don't have time for that kind of stuff. We work on, I do feel like the gut microbiome is very, very important in modulating your stress. There's a huge gut-brain connection. We know that 90% of our serotonin is actually produced in our gut, which is our happy hormone. Dopamine is produced in our gut. GABA, which is our calming hormone, is produced in our gut. But I don't think that pharmaceutical SSRIs and those types of antidepressants depression medications are the answer. I think doctors have had their hands tied for many years because of that. They know that, we know many people who have been on those types of medication without much success. There is a small a group of the population that does have some success on those medications, but most of them don't. And they actually make a problem worse oftentimes. So I think there's, lots of things to do to just minimize stress, and some of them are making hard decisions. But I definitely think focusing on your gut microbiome is a great place to start.
At Just Thrive, these guys are basing their products off of more clinical research than anybody else on the market. It boosts energy, it improves sleep, promotes a healthy gut, healthy skin, encourages healthy weight management. I've added both of these to my supplement regimen, and I would suggest that you guys do the same thing right now. For a limited time, you can save 20% off a 90-day bottle of either the probiotic or the Just Calm if you go to justthrivehealth.com and use promo code SPICER. Go to justthrivehealth.com. justthrivehealth.com. Use promo code SPICER. You get 20% off just for trying it. And I'm telling you, what the folks at Just Thrive are doing to make sure that we've got an effective probiotic is critical. Try it now. Use that promo code. Okay. So I want to get back to that for a second, but you touched on meditation. Is that something that do you meditate?
I do.
Okay. So tell me, I have been reading about if I wanted to just introduction, like I don't know what it looks like. I have these visions that I sit there with my arms crossed going, like if I've never done this before, I feel like the first time I went to yoga class and I'm like sprawled across the floor with sweat dripping. Right. What's my introduction to meditation? What is there an app? Is there just something you can tell, hey, sit still and repeat a name? Or what would be the first thing that somebody should do if this is what they wanted to accomplish, taking the stress down, they wanted to do some form of meditation? How would you give them the first step?
Yeah. So the first step would just be to find a, quiet place. Obviously, I try to do it like first thing in the morning when I wake up where nobody else is up, and I just sit down and I just say a word over and over and over again. And that's all I do. And
no, there's a name for this, right? I'm just trying to I literally have it up on my screen right now. Where's the guy's name?
No, I don't know.
I got to find the guy's name, but there is a doctor who, this is what it's called. It begins with, oh gosh, I'm trying to find but anyway, you're touching on something that I've been, again, reading about. It's this idea of, that they've been doing for a lot of, veterans, and first responders to get them introduction to Medicare. So anyway, I totally get what you're saying, but you just repeat the word over and over again.
Yeah. And then there's so many other people who just do it. They just sit in silence, and people are like, well, my thoughts go everywhere. My thoughts are always in my head, and that's okay. Like, that's okay. You can't beat yourself up over it. The biggest thing is just to do it slowly. Start with 5 minutes, maybe, then go to 10 minutes the next day, and just go slowly and just sit with your own thoughts, or you could repeat the same word. It's so different, so individual for people, but that seems to work with me because my thoughts are always, I've got lots of thoughts running around, and as I'm sure you do, Sean. But I think saying one word over and over again has really worked for me.
All right, I'm going to try. I've been wanting to take the first step but I feel silly about it. I didn't know how to try it, so I will try 5 minutes sitting there saying the same word over and over again. But I get it. The one thing that I hear consistently from high performing people is that one of the things that they've added to their lives is a degree of meditation. And I keep saying, I need to do it. I need to do it. Okay, Tina, you've now given me something to do. And all right, let me kind of go backwards before we get back to this gut thing, because I want to touch on that in a second. But the other thing that I keep thinking of is post-COVID, I feel like we've gotten rid of any sense of germs getting near us. We wipe everything down. We Purell the heck out of everything. We don't want kids to come into contact. Are we setting ourselves up for more problems because we've kind of desanitized everything and not allowed our body to come in contact with germs?
Yeah, I do think it's one of the most detrimental things we could do is to over sanitize. Our microbes that are living in and on us, this bacteria is actually so beneficial for us. And we have been trained now to like put the hand sanitizer on. I mean, well before COVID, every time I was on a podcast, I'd be like, don't ever use hand sanitizers or antibacterial hand soaps. I mean, we are more bacterial than we are human cells. And yet we're killing all the microbes off of our hands all the time, and we're not exposing ourselves to these microbes and these bacteria. We have this idea that bacteria is bad. Less than 1% is actually harmful. 99% of bacteria is either benign or it's actually incredibly beneficial to us. So we have been kind of brainwashed that bacteria is bad when really bacteria is actually incredibly beneficial to us. So I am definitely not a fan of antibacterial soaps and hand sanitizers.
So where's the line? Like, growing up, as I'd come in from being outside, playing in the dirt, the first thing my mom would say is, before you sit down, wash your hands, right? We'd have a bar of Ivory soap or something. I'd wash my hands. Where's the line between that and Purelling the heck out of everything?
Yeah, I just would not use Purell or any other antibacterial hand sanitizer or antibacterial hand soap. I would just get rid of all antibacterial. Nothing wrong with using soap and water to clean your hands, but I would argue if you're in a clean nature place and you're playing in the dirt, you should be touching the dirt and then eating some food. And I know this is going to be controversial. Now, obviously the parks that we are, in urban America, you go to the park, they're spraying Roundup all over the grass.
Right.
And so those maybe aren't the cleanest. So go ahead and wash your hands with soap and water.
Right.
But, I definitely think being exposed to the dirt is actually incredibly beneficial to you, especially if it's clean dirt and hasn't been like over farmed.
Okay, well, wait till I come in for dinner the next time. I tell my wife, Tina said it's okay just to jump in. All right, let's get back to this gut health thing. Again, I will admit my naivete on this. I remember, I don't know, probably about 4 years ago, one of my buddies that I served on active duty with, who's a much more health conscious person than I am, turned me on to probiotics. He was like, "Hey, this is one that you need to take." And I went on Amazon, I ordered it, and I just started taking it. And I don't know why. He was like somebody that was always, he's very healthy. He's into fitness. He was always reading about this well before it became kind of the cool thing. And I just did it. What are the health benefits, if anything, to something like that?
Yeah, well, probiotics are a really, really important tool to your health. We know that the gut microbiome is made up of this totality of organisms. So we've got bacteria, fungi, mold, parasites, all these different microorganisms are living in and on us. And we are 10 times more bacterial cells than we are human cells. So that's really hard for people to wrap their head around because remember, we have this thing that bacteria is bad, and yet we have more bacterial cells than we have human cells, 10 times more. And yet we're doing all these things that are so disruptive to our bacteria. So probiotics is a really great tool to help support your gut health. We want more of the friendly bacteria.
So what does that do? If I take it, is promoting it? Is it getting rid of the bad and promoting the good?
Yeah, well, it depends on what type of probiotic you would take.
I was going to ask you because I literally, as we were getting ready for this, I had a kombucha and I was like, okay, is this, and then the yogurt sitting next to it says filled with probiotics. And I'm like, it's almost to become a catchphrase now, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, gut health, probiotics, it's such a hot topic right now. And I mean, it's a hot topic for good reason. It's not a fad. I mean, the Human Microbiome Project was launched by the National Institutes of Health about 12 years ago, told us more about the gut than we ever knew before. We now know that the gut is dictating virtually all aspects of our overall health. Most people associate gut issues as having a digestive issue. So having gas or bloating, diarrhea, constipation. And those are absolutely indications that you have some gut imbalance going on. But now what we understand is that mental health or mood disorders are associated with our gut health. Heart disease, cardiovascular issues, any other type of cardiovascular issues, diabetes, allergies, autoimmune issues, acne, eczema. I mean, the list goes on. All of these chronic conditions are really stemming from an imbalance in our gut health. And
so how do we know if we've got a healthy one? What's that? What's the indicator?
Yeah, well, one indicator is being really regular, knowing that you're regular. And it's funny because I talk about poop all the time, so it's not anything strange for me, but I always thought I was regular. And then I started taking probiotics and I realized like, oh, now I know what regular is. It's like, really just almost feeling like cleaned out and having energy. And it's amazing what starts to happen when you start to take care of your gut. But, unfortunately, in the world we're living in, they estimate that 80% of the adult population actually has something called a leaky gut.
I was going to ask you, it sounds so disgusting. I feel like I've got like a drip coming out of me. When they say that, what do they mean? Do you actually leak? What is that? What does it mean?
Leaky gut is basically you've got this intestinal cell wall. And over time and from eating, sometimes you get these holes in them. And so toxins that are in your gut, which are not really problematic in your gut, start to seep into your bloodstream. Well, when toxins seep into your bloodstream, you start to have this this inflammatory response by your immune system. And so all of a sudden, people start developing autoimmune issues. They start developing anxiety, depression, whatever it might be, because you've got this inflammatory response. It's a chronic inflammatory response by your bloodstream. And so they're estimating that 80% of the adult population actually has a leaky gut, which the medical term is metabolic endotoxemia. But it's leaky gut just is much easier to understand. Yeah. It's basically holes in your intestinal lining that seep into your bloodstream. Even food, you could be eating food and food particles could seep into your bloodstream. Your bloodstream notices that as an invader and it starts to attack it. And now you've got this chronic inflammatory response.
Okay, so if 80% of the people have this, one, how do they know they have it? And then two, what should they do about it?
Yeah. Well, the only way to really test if you have a leaky gut is something that's done in a medical set or in a research lab setting. You test LPS toxins, which stands for lipopolysaccharides. So these LPS toxins, if they seep into your bloodstream, that's the way you would test it in a research setting. Unfortunately, there's no commercial tests available. But I mean, generally, most chronic conditions are stemming from a gut imbalance of some sort. Okay. You have metabolic condition, you have obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular issues. Those are definitely stemming from some type of imbalance going on in your gut. You have an allergy of some sort. You are having anxiety, depression. These are all stemming from an imbalance in your gut. So
if 80% has something, then the odds are pretty good that you do have it. What do you do to fix it?
Okay. Yeah. And when I say 80% of the population, they estimate has a leaky gut, what I'm saying is that they have a leaky gut. That doesn't mean they have a chronic condition yet, because having a leaky gut is kind of like a leaky faucet. It's like it's leaking, it's not causing you problems. And then one day somebody has an allergy. One day somebody has, diabetes. One day somebody has anxiety. So one day you have IBS, whatever it might be. And so it's this chronic, this leaking of the faucet, and one day it overflows, and that's when you get the condition. So what do? You take a high quality probiotic is one big thing, but focusing on your gut health is so critical.
So you founded your company and put out a probiotic. What makes what you guys do different than, say, the one that I just get on Amazon?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is survivability. You want to take a probiotic that survives the gastric system and gets to the intestines alive. This was very important to us when we launched. We know that there's abuses in the pharmaceutical industry. We did not want to be a part, there's going to be abuses in the supplement industry too, and there already are. We focus on products that actually survive the gastric system and get to the intestines alive. That is the number one problem with probiotics on the market, is most of them are dying. We see many of them in the refrigerated section. And I always laugh, because when you think about it, if a probiotic needs to be refrigerated to stay alive, that means it can't even withstand the room temperature of the store shelf. So if it can't withstand the room temperature of the store shelf, what will it do when it gets into your body, which is 98.6? It's going to die. But let alone when it hits your stomach acid. The stomach acid is so acidic. It's meant to be the gastric barrier. If your finger touched the acid in your stomach, it would burn your finger. So we know that most probiotics are dying by the time they get to the intestines. We work with a probiotic strain called spores. And these are not mushroom spores. They have this endospore shell around themselves. And it sounds kind of ugly, but they're so magnificent because they actually have this shell around themselves that allows it to survive that journey from the temperature of your body through the intestines, through the stomach acid and into the intestines. And that's when they take their shell off and they go into a live vegetative cell state. And it's why we see such profound results.
So there is a big difference, right? I mean, that's clearly which probiotic you take matters.
Yeah, and we were disruptors in the market. I mean, we came to the market with something that nobody had seen. It was an uphill battle, but we knew that this was going to work, and we saw it work. It was research. We only bring products that are missing and needed and research to the market. So we have double-blind human clinical trials. And
so it's funny. Before this interview, I was going through your company, Just Thrive, and I was on justthrivehealth.com. And there's another product that you guys have that I think pretty much everyone who knows me thinks that without even knowing anything about it, they think I should take, called Just Calm. What is, before everyone gets a big thought that that's who should take Just Calm, and what is the difference? What are you trying to get at by offering that?
Yeah, so Just Calm is also a probiotic strain, but it's a probiotic strain called psychobiotic. And that strain is actually going in and helping reduce your cortisol levels, balance out your cortisol levels, actually it allows you to perceive stress better. So there's 8 clinical trials on this particular ingredient, this bifidolongum 1714 strain, that is showing that it allows you to perceive stress better, handle stress better. Actually, there's a study on it that shows it changes your brainwave activity to more of a theta state, which is that flow state. And it has been such a game changer. I'm a huge fan, or I'm a huge believer that everyone should start on the spore-based probiotic because it's foundational, and everything else that you do is going to work that much better. But the Just Calm is quickly becoming, close to our number one selling product, just because it's unfortunately so relevant in this day and age.
I think you just described another thing that I need to take now, because I think there's a lot of people who are like, all right, Sean, take it down a notch. All right, I'm going to add that one to my to the menu of things but I get it. And that makes sense. Now I realize why I need to switch over and why I need to add the Just Calm as well, because again, this is why I love these conversations. It matters. It's going beyond the label, because probiotics, like I said, I open up my fridge, it's got so many things that say it, but they're not all created equal. And I get what you're saying. Tina Anderson, I loved our conversation. Thank you for joining us and breaking this all down, because it really is confusing out there. And I think your journey to going from big pharma now to this whole natural health thing has really given me a better understanding of to what we're facing out there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing this awareness to your audience too. I think it's such an important topic, and I appreciate you using your platform to share good health and help people get to the root cause. And I always tell everyone, give yourself grace on this journey. It's just baby steps, one step at a time.
All right, baby steps. I'll check back in with you, see how my baby steps are doing. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, guys, I hope you loved that conversation with Tina. I learned a lot. I've gotten into going down rabbit holes all the time about my health. And I was so amazed at everything that the gut does and so many of the issues that we have that stem from the gut. I've added both the probiotic and the Just Calm to my daily regimen. And right now, if you go to justthrivehealth.com, justthrivehealth.com, you can get 20% off either one of these. These are 90-day supplies of both the probiotic and the Just Calm. I'm going to do both. Maybe you want to do one or the other, but go to justthrivehealth.com and check it out. Like I said, I started doing this. If it really does make a difference. The information that Tina shared was so critical. Go to justthrivehealth.com and take advantage of that 20% offer using promo code SPICER. Thanks for listening to the show. I enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. Please continue to subscribe, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It's always good to make sure that you're covered. It's free on all platforms, so you don't have to worry about that. But just make sure, in case big tech comes after us, you're covered. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.